are you preparing yourself for a moment when you have the opportunity to either hesitate or commit? And what I mean by
Yes.
that is, right, are you going to hesitate and let all the negative thought patterns come into your head, become the focus of
Right.
where the mind goes, like, I'm an imposter, I can't do this, like, why me? Or is it a moment of commitment?
From the Grit Institute, this is the Grit Factor podcast. And I'm Shannon Huffman-Polson, former Apache helicopter pilot, speaker, and author of The Grit Factor, Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the most male-dominated organization in the world. Our guest today is Dr. Jannell MacAulay, a U.S. Air Force veteran, combat pilot, and leadership expert who has dedicated her career to helping individuals and teams excel under pressure. She was the first to introduce mindfulness as a proactive performance strategy within the U.S. military, proving that peak performance isn't just about physical stamina, but also mental resilience. Beyond her groundbreaking work in the military, Jannell holds a PhD in strategic health and human performance, and has co-created The Warrior's Edge, a high-performance mindset training program developed alongside NFL coach Pete Carroll and sports psychologist Dr. Michael Gervais. Today, she works with elite military units, Fortune 500 companies, and leaders across industries, helping them unlock their full potential by embracing mindfulness, resilience, and intentional leadership. In this episode, we're going to dive into Jannell's journey, from her time as a combat pilot to her research on human performance, the power of mindfulness in high-stakes environments, and what it really takes to cultivate a mindset of excellence in leadership and in life. If you've ever wondered how to train your mind to perform at the highest level, or how to bring mindfulness and grit together to transform your leadership, this conversation is for you. Let's take off. I want to start off by saying that you juggled machetes once.
I did.
That's amazing.
So yeah, little known fact about me. So when I was a child, I picked up a baton, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I was a dancer and gymnast prior to that, but there was something about twirling a baton that really resonated with me. And I loved it. My parents really, to their credit, invested a lot because it's not a cheap sport, nor is it a local sport, right? You have to travel for competition. So they really helped me develop the skill set. And with that, though, when I became 15 years old, I went to my parents and I said, okay, like, I've loved all this baton twirling stuff, but I really want to do other things, like be a cheerleader and like run track and do other, things in high school. And so my mom had invested in, part of baton twirling are these pageants where you wear like this gown. And
Sure.
I know this is a long answer to your short question, but I'll get there. So I wore all these fancy gowns when I would do modeling, strut routine, twirl routine. It was like a whole pageant for baton twirlers. And she had just bought me this like really pretty dress. And she was mad when I was like, I'm quitting baton twirling. So she's like, you're signing up for this Miss Teen pageant and to use that dress. And so I started off as Miss Teen Orange County, and then I was Miss Teen California. And my talent was twirling batons, but to just ump the ante a little bit in my talent, I twirled machetes too in my routine. It was like Robin Hood themed, and it was fun.
It's awesome. I love it. I mean, it's a perfect setup for everything else that you do in your life, both by contrast and by support. So it's a wonderful opening story for sure. You've had an incredible career. You continue to have an incredible career, and you have piloted C-130s in combat zones, and you have led critical military strategy sessions. How did you get into this? I know you twirled machetes. We got that part. So how did you move from that into this military service and leadership?
That's a great question. So two real influences in my life were my uncle. He was a Marine helicopter pilot. So he actually flew Marine One for President Reagan, which was
Wow.
yeah, it was really cool. We got to go out to DC and kind of see him out there. And then every time he would fly President Reagan and Marine One around Southern California, where I grew up, we would go see him do his job there too. So I was always around military, aviation. Both my grandfathers served in the Marines.
Yep.
My dad was a police officer. My mom was a nurse. I think public service was a calling for me for sure.
Sure.
My uncle used to take me to the air shows, and so I was exposed to that at a really young age. So that was the initial influence. And then the secondary influence, my dad was always trying to encourage me to reach for the stars, do anything that I
Yeah.
want to do. I mentioned in my TED talk, by the young age of 7, I could distinctly remember my dad telling anyone that would listen that I was going to be a combat pilot or a submarine warfare commander. And this was even during like my tutu, right? And in the 1980s, those jobs weren't available to women, but I grew up not knowing society had put barriers on anything I could do. And I think
Right.
that was right. Like that was his goal, was to inspire me to do or be anything I wanted. Now I will say my dad gave me a lot of drive. I do believe my upbringing led me to this, like, if one door closes, like I'm going to find the window, or I'm going to find another way around to get to where I'm going, because I've always been very vision oriented and goal oriented in my life. However,
Sure.
I like to say it was an incomplete strategy, like drive. And I know we're going to talk about grit as well, right? Passion and perseverance. Like I had a lot of perseverance and I had a lot of drive. Like you tell me I can't do something, I would find a way. Passion piece I think was missing. Like the why behind things, the mental skills I needed to
Yes.
navigate through the really long hard.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think I had a burnout point in my career where I was doing the drive, go, 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 but I was always missing something. And that was like the built-in recovery that training my mind would
Mm.
provide me in my later years. So anyway,
Okay.
that's the start of where it all came from, though.
That's incredible. No, and it's a wonderful overview and of some of the things that we should definitely talk about. And I know that listeners are going to love to hear through your story and your experiences. Talk about a little bit about flying C-130s.
So I flew C-130E models. So the same
Okay,
plane I flew in
good.
Vietnam, I was
Yep.
flying back in Afghanistan. I absolutely have a soft spot in my heart for a C-130E. You can like duct tape it, do what you need to do, land it in, like it's a very forgiving aircraft. It was a great plane to learn how to be a leader, right? I jumped
Sure.
in as aircraft commander right away, and how to lead a crew, how to lead a crew in combat, how to manage really hard circumstances and challenging situations and have to make those
Right.
decisions on the fly. I grew up really fast, I think, in that community and with the responsibility
Yes.
given to our young people. Um,
Yes.
and I have to say, I don't know if you felt this as well, but we do a lot of training in the military. And as much as, I nobody wants war, nobody wants those types of experiences in their life, but I
Sure.
did feel like I was ready to go, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to stop flying around the flagpole. Like I wanted to do something meaningful with the skill set of flying this plane, of being able to go into combat zones and have that lived experience. And I really, truly believe that it's made me the person I am today as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a particular mission you remember that you could share?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, so many and interesting stories. One in particular, I was flying my C-130 and we got struck by lightning. And because in the C-130 you can't fly over the thunderstorms. You kind of have to pick your way, through, because we fly low and slow. And
Sure.
we were maintaining our distance, but things happen, right? We got a little too close to convective activity, got struck by lightning, and 3 of our engine generators like went out. And in the E model, they don't have a disconnect, right? So the proper engine shutdown procedure is you
Oh,
put the engine, if that, to not have a dead generator spinning on a live engine. And they fixed that in all the modern versions of the C-130, by the way. But our E models were kind of archaic. And so we're sitting there in this situation where like the proper procedure would be to shut down 3 engines, which obviously you don't want to do with a bunch of passengers in the back and such. So we ended up like getting 2 of our engine generators back up. We only had to shut down 1 engine, which when you've got 4, not that big of a deal. But it was like, we had the St. Elmo's fire on the windscreen,
wow.
had the lightning strike. It was just a little more heightened fun for one night for all of us on the crew. But
No, that's great. Well, there's a great Rolling Stone article, and I remember when it came out, I remember emailing with you a little bit about this, that talks about once you were further along in your career, you're married, you're actually expecting a baby, and you're put into this very unusual and unexpected circumstance where you think that you're just going to be doing some kind of back office planning, but instead you're in this unbelievably high stakes, seemingly completely impossible mission, leading a team to neutralize Syria's chemical weapons under pressure. Now, I want to just mention that in the article, one of my favorite pieces is that you are literally discussing strategy and chemical weapon strategy in the lactation room. I think that's sort of just spectacular. So talk a little bit about this experience and when you realized, hey, this mission that I thought that I was going to be given has actually turned into something very, very different. This is real, this is happening. What's going through your mind? How did you start to recalibrate and refocus and move forward?
Big believer in crucible moments.
Mm,
Are you preparing yourself for a moment when you have the opportunity to either hesitate or commit? And what I mean by that
yes,
is, right, are you going to hesitate and let all the negative thought patterns come into your head, become the focus of where
right.
your mind goes, like, I'm an imposter, I can't do this, like, why me? Or is it a moment of commitment where you
Yeah,
can truly believe in yourself, trust yourself to take a risk, and step outside your comfort zone? We all have these moments that are in front of us.
absolutely.
And the way you prepare for those moments is you have to repetitively do hard things to test yourself in those unknown waters of risk and
Yes.
pressure, right? And I do believe that both my dad's strategy of building up the grit and drive in me, and then
Yeah,
later developing the associated mental skills to help me even accelerate that further,
sure.
were critical to being in the right place at the right time and
Yeah,
having myself ready for the risk that was in front of me.
sure.
So I think that kind of built up to it. I will tell you, I went kicking and screaming to this organization, kind of, right? I was a pilot. I really didn't want to go sit on staff, especially in the space of chemical weapons, which I knew nothing about. But I had just finished a degree in strategy. I was trained
Yeah.
to think about big problems. So that was kind of why they sent me there. Shortly after they handed me the mission, I realized, like, the reason they gave it to me was because I knew nothing about chemical weapons. Because
Nothing.
anyone who knew anything was like, I'm not going near that mission with a 10-foot pole. It's like bad actors, Syrian civil war, Thai terrorist activity. We're not even 100% sure of everything that's going on inside that country. Who would sign up to lead this mission? Like, I was like, I just want a job, and like, I'll take that project on. And the reason why I was discussing it in the lactation room is because a lot of the only people I could find that were like willing to kind of join the team and start really exploring this were, my friend Tina, who I met while our babies were in daycare together. And then two young ladies that had kind of just come to DITRA, the organization, and really didn't know what to expect either, right? We were all just like, let's try to solve this big problem. And it was one of those things where there were a million ways it could go wrong and one way
Yeah.
it could go right. And we happened to find that one way, but no one wanted to listen to our plan. And it was a exercise in grit, determination, self-trust, right? We had to trust ourselves
Sure.
to take the risk. And it did take a lot of mental strength and fortitude to really stick to our guns. Now, I will give credit to a couple of our bosses. I had a 2-star boss who was ordered not to talk about the ship option, which was the option we came up with from the highest levels of government. And he just was like, I'll take top cover, but we know this is the right thing to do. So we did like a whisper campaign throughout the Pentagon where we're throwing ship option papers on people's desks and at the State Department, trying to get someone of influence to start at least
Sure.
talking about it in a very real way. And then I spent the better part of 4 months over in The Hague, working with our international partners as the representative for the US government, building the plan, working with the Syrians and Russians. And as a woman, that could have been very intimidating. But I will tell you, I feel like everything leading up to that moment gave me the courage, the grit, the
Yeah.
necessary mental strength to stick to my guns and really see the mission through.
Yeah. And all along the way, it sounds like you as a team of these four unexpected and unlikely women that were managing this were often dismissed as being just another pretty face, more or less. Is that right?
Absolutely. We didn't even really have designated like workspace or people like manpower to kind of um, pursue this mission because they didn't take it as seriously as they should have in the beginning, right? Because honestly, I don't think anyone ever thought Assad would actually use their chemical weapons or use his chemical weapons against a civilian population to even
Sure.
put us into this, thrust our team into kind of the spotlight and being the only ones in the entirety of the US government that had been studying this problem. Um,
Right.
right? No one really took it seriously. And so when it did happen, all of a sudden it was like all eyes on us because we had been studying the problem for quite a few months up until that point.
My gosh, it's incredible. Did you ever doubt yourself or doubt the mission?
So I am a human being. So yes, of course. I tell people all the time, like mental skills are not to like they're not perfect and they're not going to
Sure.
automatically make you a badass and have productive thoughts constantly. The power is in what they teach you, which is the redirect, right? The redirect and the focus. And
Yes.
so yes, of course, like I felt like I was doubting myself. I also felt like, can this really work? Like, the numbers add up, everything, the plan looks great, but can it really work? And I think two things were effective for me. One is I learned early from my dad that there's a difference between doing the right thing and doing things right.
Mm.
And most military members, because we are so checklist oriented, this is the way we've always done it, doing things right becomes the norm. And
Sure.
actually, times doing the right thing becomes the more risky option. And
Right.
but I learned early that doing the right thing, following your morals and your guiding principles will always be the correct direction to head. And
Sure.
so, right. So anytime I would kind of be going between, well, what would everybody expect me to do in this scenario is like, just play along, right? Like, don't make waves. Like, if they're
Yep.
telling you a dumb idea, just believe them. Okay, you're right. I can't come up with this idea. I'm not a chemical weapons expert. But then doing the right thing told me, no, I truly believe that we're onto something. I believe that this is the right answer. And this is the moment, right, where you want to fall on your sword, like, because I do believe so strongly that it was the right thing to do. So that
Yeah.
guided me in those moments. But I think also being able to quickly, I say my mind sometimes it's like the OODA loop, right? Like
Yeah.
it's quickly you can observe and orient that you're following and chasing thoughts that are not helpful, right? And
Sure.
then decide and act to make a rational response to what's happening to you.
Mm.
And the quicker you are at
Great.
the loop, right? The better it's like you beat the
Yep.
enemy. So right, so then you beat the negative thoughts if you can be quicker inside that loop. And I think that my mental skills up to that point also allowed me to be quicker in reframing what was happening so that I could stick
Sure.
to the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. That's really powerful. I can see why you train it. Makes a lot of sense. That's great. So, so how do you, and this goes for all of your military career and maybe even some of your work now. When this team of women was dismissed as Cinnamon and his harem, referring to your boss and, of course, the four of you as women, how do you navigate that kind of bias and still remain focused on the mission, especially when you're not being taken seriously? You're not given the resources up front to be able to do your job. You're not even given a place to do your work. How do you navigate that kind of bias and still make sure that the mission gets done and not be derailed by the frustrations around it?
For me, I was not a stranger to that. Like that was not the first time in my career that this had. I was the only woman in pilot training, in my
Yep.
class, and I had to, navigate that back in 1999, 2000 kind of time frame. When I
Yeah.
got my first master's, like in exercise physiology and kinesiology, very male dominated,
Yeah.
and then flying airplanes, right? I mean, like you're surrounded
Yes.
by.
Yeah.
My answer to most of this is just be a badass.
Yeah.
Like don't give them a reason to doubt you. Like most people,
Yes.
they'll start from that doubting spot just because of their own bias. And that's the
Yes.
other thing. I can't control that,
That's
right?
right.
Like I can spend all day trying to change your mind about and then I'm going to lose some of my performance on the inside of that, right? Because if I'm so
Yes.
worried about you, I'm not actually becoming a high performing, focused, disciplined individual in what I'm trying to accomplish.
That's
And so
right.
I just stop worrying about you and I just bring my badass self to whatever it is I'm doing. And again, when it's like,
Yeah.
what is the right thing to do and how to do things right? Like the right thing to do is just to be your best self and not worry
Yes.
about it. We're human beings, so it's hard, right? Like I'm not going to say that it's
Right.
not a difficult or challenging thing for us,
Yeah.
but we can train our minds to, control what we can control, which is more of our internal
Yes.
environment than anything external to us.
No, well said. I always say you show up and you be excellent, right? If you're excellent, there's really nothing anybody can say, or they can, but it's not going to be something that can go anywhere. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But it's better to say just be a badass. That's excellent. So, what would you say to other young women leaders who are in these places, in these all male fields? And there's still a lot of them out there. It's sort of surprising, actually, that it's 2025 and we're still talking about this in the same way in many, many cases. What would you say to them when they are facing that kind of a situation besides show up and be a badass, when it feels really tough? What else would you say?
Well, I think, I study performance, and what I
Yeah.
know about anybody who wants to excel in their chosen career fields or in their skill sets, you have to be a master of your craft, right?
Yeah.
So something that I think sometimes we lose sight of, right? We still have to be like,
Yeah.
you can have all the mental skills in the world, but you still have to be really good. Like the mental skills just allow you to execute high performance skills when there's pressure,
Yeah.
right? Those moments where you require psychological flexibility, but you still have to be really good at what you do. So you have to invest in
Right.
and resource yourself
Yep.
for whatever you're doing. So that's what I always tell young women, like be really good at what
Yeah.
your skill set is.
Yeah.
And you also have to train your body, right? Like we
Yep.
have to take care of our bodies. That's a big
Yeah.
part of it. And then the third thing is you have to train your mind, right? So you have to
Yeah.
prepare for those moments when there's going to be naysayers, when there's going to be
Yes.
doubt. That doubt can be internal, like the things that just my mind creates, but
Sure.
sometimes doubt is the jerk that's sitting next to me, right? That's actually saying
That's
it.
right.
And so you have to be able to filter through that noise, just like you would
Yeah.
filter thoughts inside your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, none of this is easy, right? Like mental skills, people will sometimes say, Dr. MacAulay teaches those fuzzy skills that are soft. And correct them immediately and say, training your mind, these are hard skills. They are
Yeah.
some of the hardest skills you will ever like commit to. And most of us will only commit to a certain amount of time and then we're going to lose it because that is how hard they are for around
Right.
consistency and intentionality. And so, yeah, so when you become an expert and you train your body and you train your mind, like I think you set yourself up in the best position
Yep.
to handle whatever's going to come at you. And really, what those naysayers are, what those moments are in your life, they're just challenges.
Mm.
And they're either going to show up, right? Your brain's going to either say, this is too much for me. Like I can't handle this moment. This stressor's too big. This jerk is too big. This moment's too big. And then you're going to see it as a threat and then go into survival,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Or you're going to see it as just another challenge, right? And your mind is
Mm.
going to say, we have the resources to meet the demands of this moment. We can
Right.
rise to the challenge and start thriving hard instead of being fearful of it. And
Yes.
it's a decision. That's a decision that I think a lot of women aren't necessarily built for originally. Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We tend to want to be people pleasing, not make waves, right? Like not
Hmm.
stand in our own space. And so we have to fight against that tendency
Sure.
to get
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
spaces of accomplishment.
So when you're working with a leader or a group of leaders, and I know you do a lot of this, on their mental skills, where do you start? Where do people start?
So I start with a technique. I call mental push-ups, which is rooted in the skill of mindfulness.
Hmm.
Because if you can't quiet your mind, I can
Mm,
teach you a whole bunch of badass other skill sets, but your mind's going to be noisy. And so you're not
sure.
going to accept or really take the information you're given, right?
Yeah.
At that deeper level of learning, if you're distracted by a noisy and chaotic mind. And
Right.
right, because right, like even think about this, like how many times do you go through a learning class, right? Like, and
Sure.
I teach workshops too, right? How
Yep.
like people come into your workshops and everyone comes in with some level of mental baggage.
Yep.
Maybe they had a chaotic commute where they said to themselves, I hit every red light every time I drive to work. And then that feeds into like their kids getting out of the car, like angry and late and rushing. And so now their kids are going into a learning environment in a state of distress. I walk into my
Yes.
space in a state of distress, and then I see an email that gets me even more upset or something on my social media. Now I'm walking into your class to learn about grit, and I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking about all these distracting thoughts. And so
Yes.
the technique of doing mental push-ups is like quieting your mind. So then you
Mm,
can actually listen and learn with I won't say no distractions because we're humans, but
sure.
a lower amount of
Mm,
distracting thought patterns that take you out of the moment. So
sure.
mental push-ups is what I think is the biggest bang for your buck in what I teach for people.
Yeah.
And here's another example. We spend so much of our time distracted we don't even realize it. Right. And
Mm,
in most of our moments of boredom, we pick up our phone, we start scrolling on something, and then we realize that's what we're doing. Right. We lack awareness. So I
yes.
teach people for when you figure out, oh, I'm doing something mindless, put your phone away, do a minute of mental push-ups, then pick up your phone. And if you want to mindlessly scroll, at least now it's a conscious decision.
Okay. Good. I like that.
Yes,
Excellent. I might have to use that with my teenager.
absolutely.
That's right. That's excellent. So coming back to the idea of leadership, and this is all, of course, related because this is how leaders lead and how people work in challenging environments. Right now, the environment is challenging in many different ways. But what would you say needs to change in our leadership culture generally, whether it's the military or the corporate world? I know you do work with both of those to support women leaders, but really to support all of us to be able to contribute our best selves. What needs to change in how we look at and how we execute leadership?
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, one, obviously, my passion is teaching people how to invest in their psychological performance. And we are
Yes.
missing that. We don't train
Yes.
military operators. We train them how to be effective warfighters by just teaching them how to operate in their stress response when
Yes.
it's chaotic. What we don't teach them is how to have a corresponding value associated with exercising our rest and recovery space, right? Our parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
And because of that, we create veterans with this like go, 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 hustle, burnout mentality, which is everybody just is like, oh, it's a given. I'm going to burn out and be exhausted. Well, that doesn't have to be the given, right? Like you can do it.
Mm,
You can accelerate professional success and not sacrifice health and relationships if you invest in recovery, which I think is embedded in how we train our
yep.
mind. So
Great.
I would tell all leaders that they need to incorporate space for psychological performance, for investing in slowing down to speed up,
Ah,
right? Which is so contrary
great.
to our entire culture. In fact, just quick sidebar, we have a culture of competitive stress, right? Like we one
Yeah.
up each other on our stress constantly. And that happens in the workplace. Like Monday morning, it's always like, how was your weekend? It's like, well, I did this, I did this, I did that. And then, like I worked all Saturday, to catch up on things. And then I'm still here with my like coffee, like ready to take on the day. And then
It's so true.
right. And if someone were to say, it's a true story for me, I said one time when all my peers are like one upping each other on their stress, I was like, well, I had a great weekend. I finished all my work last week, like played with my kids all weekend, like everybody's healthy, slept great. And I kid you not, the sentence was like, well, she's obviously not working hard enough. Nobody was like,
Oh,
teach me how to do that, right? Because our culture values the busy over
yes.
quality. Um,
Right.
So that's the I think the cultural phenomena. So in order to combat that as leaders, we need to create space and value in the slowdown, in the
Yes.
reflection, in the investment in, like I say when I come out to teach a workshop for a company, this is an investment in you that you never get because you're doing the job every day, right?
That's
So
right.
right, take this moment to reflect and like think about the person you want to be, the leader you want to be, the parent you want to be, because it skill sets in the mental space like transition all arenas that you operate in. So yes,
Right.
the first thing would be investing in psychological performance, and making that part of their culture.
Sure.
Right? And as the leader, slowing down and demonstrating and role modeling that behavior as well. And then the second thing I think we have to invest in, and specific, I think to women, is offering more opportunities to welcome people to
Mm,
the table and to the conversation. I don't know if you felt like this, but sometimes I felt like I was not necessarily included, but I would bring
mhm.
my own chair anyway. And-
Yes, for sure.
right. And I found that most
Yeah.
times when you bring your own chair, they're not going to tell you to leave, right? Because then that would sound really horrible.
Right.
Right? But if you bring your own chair, and then I think this is the problem with women too. We don't have enough other women who
Mhm.
bring and pull up a chair for the women below them.
That is completely true, and I don't understand why that is, to be completely honest. But that's true.
I have a theory. I
All
have a
right.
theory.
What's the theory?
Okay. There's no scientific evidence behind this, but just my experience and what I've seen and heard from other people. When you're one of, right? Like when you're the only woman, because I've been the only woman in different scenarios,
Yes.
the uniqueness that gets assigned to you, right?
Hmm.
Like the only woman at the table, you're the only woman in your pilot training class, you're the only woman here. And we can feel like there's some type of assignment of um benefit, right? To that
Sure.
type. So if I then welcome someone else to come, another woman to come sit at the table with me, I dilute
Right.
my uniqueness. And so not
Yes.
all women are mentally strong enough to realize that actually that's a good thing, right? Like
Right.
not diluting your weakness, you're strengthening and powering up, right?
Yes.
Like what makes you unique as a woman. And so I think that has just what I've witnessed. I've experienced it firsthand, and I've tried to fight against that most of, my career once I realized what was happening.
I think there is actually science that backs that up. I think they call that the queen bee syndrome. And so it's an interesting thing. There's also some relatively recent data that shows what the critical mass needs to be before that starts to even out, and it's more than you think. It's maybe close to 30%. So it's a pretty tricky thing to navigate, really, because you have to have that extra layer of awareness and ability to navigate on just a whole bunch of different conflicting and intersecting levels, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
hope we can get to a cultural space where we realize that we're stronger together, you know,
Yes, I agree.
and I think we can get further. Everybody can get further. Like there's no, I don't know. I guess I don't see that it's a zero sum kind of thing, right? Like I think there's goodness for all of us.
I completely agree. I totally agree. And the guys know that. The guys do this all the time, right? And we need to be a lot better at it because we do it socially, but we don't do it as well professionally. And I think there's huge opportunity for leadership in general to be elevated by virtue of women coming together at the table. That's so well put.
For sure.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Um, So this might be slightly charged in today's political environment, but one of the things that you point out in the Rolling Stone article about the mission that you did with the chemical weapons in Syria, which again is just extraordinary, and we'll definitely link to the Rolling Stone article as well as all of the ways that people can find you online to this. But you were not the ones who were publicly celebrated for the success of that mission. How do you come to terms with the idea that oftentimes some of the most critical contributions to history do go unrecognized? And I'm just going to put a little bit of an edge on it for the spring of 2025, when some of those contributions are sometimes recognized and then maybe erased.
So very timely, this conversation. I will tell you exactly how we got Hidden Figured for like
I like that as a
phrase.
verb. I like that as a verb. That's good.
But um I had left the DC area, right? We were working in the Pentagon and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency when this happened. I went on to command. I went on to then retire from the Air Force. When the initial book called Red Line was written
Yep.
about this mission, the author had reached out to me a couple times and said, "I really want to interview you. I'd like to take a look at your notes, this and that from the mission." And because I was out in Utah at the time,
Yeah.
he wanted all his interviews in person. So
Uh-huh.
everyone else that had something to do with the mission had been interviewed. I was one of the last people, right,
Yeah.
to speak to him. So I happened to fly out to DC. He was probably 3/4 of the way we're done with the book by this point. And he sat down with me and I said, "Well, tell me what you think happened." He starts kind of telling me how it was like this guy's idea for this and that guy's idea for that. And good thing this guy was in the right place at the right time and this guy.
Oh
And
my
there was
gosh.
a little mention of even like our team. And so I kind of said to him, I'm like, "Well, didn't you talk to the three other ladies, right, that were on this team with me?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, I talked to them." And the way that they were interviewed, this is like typical, I think, of how we as women dismiss our own accomplishments. Every single one of them said, "Oh, well, I did this, but it was such a great team effort. And then the team was so great over here.
Yes.
The team was so great over there." And like, "Oh, there was so much team everywhere. Like, that's how we got this done." And then when he was talking to the men, they were saying, "Well, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that.
Yes.
I did that. Oh, that was my idea." And so as I was talking to him, like, that is not the correct story. Like, you're missing the heart of I think what was so unique about what we were able to do, right? Like who
Yes.
actually came up with that idea? Who was actually and the way chemical weapons planning works is the planners become the executors as well, which is not normally in military operations, right? Different people have
Yes.
roles, but we got to see the mission all the way through. And so it was like we were like the spoke in the wheel. Yes, it was a huge
Right.
effort. There were so many critical team members, but really our core team was the center point of coordinating all those efforts, of bringing those pieces together. And just like we do as women, we just said we were just grateful to have a role and to be part of the team. And at that point, the writer was a great guy. I really enjoyed speaking to him, but he was like, "My book is already 3/4 done. The editors like the direction it's headed, and I'm really sorry." He's like, he actually told me, "Save your story because I think it needs to be told somewhere else."
Oh my gosh. So Rolling Stone picked it up.
Rolling Stone picked it up
There you go.
and told the story. So we did get to share because I think it's so important
Yeah.
for, especially today, for
Yes.
young women to know,
Yeah.
like, we were moms, military officers, right? Like I was a pilot, like, and solving an international crisis, right?
Yes.
Like we were in those highest levels of government decision making and
Right.
application execution of a mission. And I want young women to know, because I still hear it. I don't know if you hear this too. "Well, I want to be a pilot, but I want to be a mom, so I'm not going to be a pilot."
Oh, all the time. It's actually amazing, and how quickly, actually, I would say kids in general, but women especially, dismiss the possibility of so many things. And I don't understand where that comes from. But you're right. We need the stories to be told. We need to hear your story. We need to share these stories and make sure that the role models are there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
had a 12-month-old baby, and while it was excruciatingly hard, right, to leave and have
Sure.
to do this mission, or my daughter was 6 at the time. And there's a really cool story I'll share with you. She was crying because I was
Yeah.
gonna, and I'd been home, right? Because I just had a baby. I was on a staff job. I really didn't travel that much. And so she wasn't used to me coming and going. And I said, "Well, Allie, I need to go do this mission, and I'm gonna take some really bad stuff away from some really bad people so that they can't hurt anybody anymore." Through her tears, she just looks up at me and just says, "Like a superhero?" And I was like, "Yes, exactly like a superhero.
Yes.
Like, mommy, you could go save the day." And our kids are resilient. And while like that moment in time was hard to be away from my,
Yes.
I do think that there's some power in demonstrating to your kids like how we can do amazing things as moms.
Yes.
We can make a difference, we can make an impact. And it doesn't always have to be like leaving your kids, right? Like you could do it at home, like
Of
in
course.
a whole variety of ways. For me, that was how I was serving in that moment. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, that is a fantastic story. I didn't have my kids until after the military, after business school, all of those things. And so they didn't get any of those cool stories, but we went to a change of command once so I could see something. It's like, we've got to go. It's an old friend from flight school and they've got to see something military. But I just actually was off a call recently with an incredible woman who runs this thing called the Recovery Cafe, and they have, I think, over 70 now across the country, and they help people who are recovering from addictions and other sorts of challenging mental health problems. And one of the things that she said, and they have pictures up of Gandhi and Chief Seattle and Mother Teresa and um, Desmond Tutu, and she said, we have to see things embodied. We have to see the values that are important to us embodied. And that's why these stories are so important, right? Is embodying these values, embodying these ideas so that other people also can do those same things.
For sure, for sure. We've
Yeah.
got to demonstrate role model. I truly believe that even one other quick story. My dad used to tell me this quote, vision is the art of seeing the invisible.
Mm,
And so even if you can't see it sometimes, because sometimes we can't, and maybe some of it is not as prevalent to be seen in today with some of the recent things, which I have to believe are going to reverse. But
yes.
right, like this has got to be like we went to extreme, like we're going to settle. Um,
Yes.
but we have to have those stories. But even absent the story, if we can still envision it and believe ourselves, right? Like we can still see those accomplishments come to fruition.
Right.
And my dad always taught me that. Like just because you can't see it doesn't mean you can't be it. Um,
Yes.
so
No, it's an important reminder too. I think it's helpful for many people, but it is not 100% necessary. Yes. It's a both and, like so many things. Yes, it's both and. It's never either or. So I'd love to talk a little bit about purpose. And purpose is critical to grit and resilience. It's critical to driving us over the long term. What do you think of when you think of purpose as starting out as giving back in your military career and how that has evolved into your career today? How has purpose evolved in your life?
So I was really lucky. I mean, it was a little bit late in my career, but midway through my military service, I had a boss ask me for the first time ever, what were my priorities in life? And
Ah,
right, I had always had feedback in some way, shape, or form, right, from bosses or mentoring sessions, but it was always them telling me what I
sure.
should where I should find purpose or what my priorities should be in life. It was the first
Yes.
time a boss actually said, well, what are your priorities in life? Like, what do
Ah,
you,
right.
right? Like, he was kind of asking me, what are my values? What's important to me? And then what is my purpose? And
Mm,
so I remember reflecting and going home and kind of writing out, these are my values, the things that are most important to me. And I came up with my faith, my family, my service, and my health. And so I was like, those are the things
excellent.
important. And then my purpose statement was I really wanted to help others be their best self. And really, like the elongated version is help others achieve peak performance with a focus on passion, purpose, and presence. And once I kind of figured out what that purpose statement was, it really helped guide me when I was in the military, right? Every
Yep.
day, the leader, my purpose was not to just lead people to lead people, but to lead them so that they can be the best version of themselves, right? Like, I don't
Yes.
really care if they remembered that I was their commander. I wanted
Sure.
them to know that they were better during that
Yep.
period of time when they were in that unit with me.
Yep.
Like that was
Yep.
was most important to me. And so I wanted to help them find a better version of themselves. And I have to say that exercise was so powerful because when I took off the uniform, many of us
Yes,
are like, where's my identity? I was a
exactly.
pilot, or I was a service member, or I did this or I did that. And you get lost. But if you have a
Yes.
purpose statement, right? Like, I want to help others be better. I knew what direction to pivot my career. So that even on days that I wasn't working, I have two little people and a husband in my life, and my role and purpose was to help them be their best. And it's really freeing when you make those decisions or
Mm,
articulate those definitions to yourself, because then decisions become easier. I won't say easy because nothing,
yes.
but they become easier in how you live your life and how you navigate any type of hard that you face.
That's so well said. And what a wonderful boss to do that. It is a very hard thing. There's something with and this is especially true of high achievers. And like you said, with the idea of doing the right thing or doing things right, this idea that there's a way for us to do things, there's a checklist of things for us to do. You get very, very good at doing those things very well and get great feedback. And then at some point, somebody says, well, what matters to you? And that becomes very challenging because you've been so focused, and I'm saying the royal you, the royal we, the royal me at least, is so focused on doing things right based on what somebody else wanted that you lose yourself sometimes.
You
And
absolutely.
that's such an important thing to have been able to do that work. That's incredible that he asked that. I was never asked that in the most. But I will say that, and you brought up the point of the veteran transition piece too, because that's a really important piece, whether it's veterans transitioning from the military to the civilian world, whether it's women transitioning within the course of their career from one job to another, or from being single to being married, or from being married to being a family. That's a huge transition for women, especially, I think, men and women both, but especially women. And there are times, and I hear this again and again from people, where they hit a point where they sometimes wonder, am I climbing the right ladder? Am I on the right track? Am I even doing all of this good work in the right direction? Have you ever felt like you've had to reevaluate your purpose in that way? And what did that process look like?
So I'm working on a book. I'm actually working on two books, one of which is going to come out fairly soon. So more to follow on.
Terrific.
Um,
Great.
but I am working on a book based and rooted in a lot of the work that I do in the speaking that I'm doing right now,
Great.
talking about this exact concept. And really, what I'm writing about is the difference between, values-based thinking and rules-based thinking, right?
Yes.
We spend a lot of time letting other people identify and decide where we should go in life. And
Yes.
absent us doing the deep work to figure out what our values are, what gives us purpose, right? You could set some really spectacular goals in the wrong direction or up the wrong ladder, right? To use your analogy. So you might be like knocking stuff out, like left, right, you're climbing the ladder and you're like, I'm a badass. Look at, I've done this, I've done this. I'm a super accomplished person. And then you wake up and you're like, why am I miserable?
Yes. That's
Everything
right.
I ever thought I wanted or what I was told to have, yet I am not happy. Why is
Yeah.
that? And I would say it's because you're not aligned as a human being. You
Mm,
haven't aligned your goals with your values. And your
sure.
values are like the magic direction.
Yes.
They're the direction and they're the right ladder, right? So
Right.
if you set up your values and you identify them, you articulate. So you can't just think them, because thoughts can, right, be you can have negative direction, right? You can have negative directions and rules-based thoughts. But if you understand your values to your core, and then what ladder to start climbing, or what to start heading toward, then you can align your goals in the proper
Yes.
direction and will have full alignment as a human being. So I think
Mm,
that's part of it, is like most of us are doing things in a rules-based way because it sounds like, well, I'm doing this because my mom and dad told me, right? They
sure.
told me to join the military. They told me to go to this college. They told me to take this career. And then the next thing is, then a boss told me, a
Yes.
mentor told me to take this job, to get this degree, right? Like when I was getting my PhD, I remember everyone saying, well, just find something that your PhD committee is going to approve,
Sure.
or something, a pet project of like your chair, and then you'll get through it. And I was like, but if I don't love that, right? If I
Right.
become an expert in something that like I really have no passion for, and
Sure.
I have to spend in the next however many years of my life devoted to it. Like, no, you want to find what you're passionate about, what aligns with your values,
Yes.
what your interests are. Then you're going to find the grit to get it done. First step. And then you're also going to create and cultivate a culture and an expertise into something that is aligned with your values and that will make you feel fulfilled and
Yes. Yes, excellent. No, that's so good. And I think it's so critical for the veteran transition space or for any of us transitioning between different parts of our lives, right? And keeping that consistency. In the grit triad, we think of this foundation of grit and resilience really as being owning our own story, which is a very values-based exercise, and then connecting to that purpose. And we're starting to talk about purpose now as the Polaris principle, and the Polaris principle meaning that there are 3 stars actually that make up Polaris. One of them is our connection to whatever is universal. That might be God. That might be, you define that in whatever way is important to you. One of them has something to do with community or those around us, our family, our colleagues. And then the other one is really got to be integral to ourselves, and making those 3 things shine together, which is not an easy thing if you're used to just following somebody else's direction, right?
absolutely. Because it's the easy button, right? And
Yeah.
for most of us as human beings, we want to get to the easy.
Yes.
And so what I try to teach people is I try to teach them to love the hard. I
Yes.
ultimately, we all love that moment when you do something that you didn't think you could do, and you kind of
Oh my
look back
gosh.
like, oh my gosh, I'm a badass. Like I can celebrate and be like, yes, I'm amazing. We love those moments as human beings. You only get those moments when you take a risk, when
That's
you
right.
comfort zone, right? When you do something hard. And so those people that play it safe, they're robbing themselves of those opportunities for those moments. And,
Yes.
I don't think we should be afraid of the hard. We should actually want to step into it and find a space to thrive.
I love that. Well, that is a wonderful way to come to a close with our time. Thank you so much for your generous wisdom and your ideas, experience, all of the many things that you share. How can people find you and learn more about what it is that you're doing?
Well, I have a website, JannellMacAulay.com. So anybody can reach out to me through my website and find out more information about the workshops and keynotes that I offer, as well as I'm on all the social media platforms. I will say, because of my training and research, I have a very healthy relationship with social media. So uh, um, it's not my favorite form of communication. It's a necessity.
Sure.
It's a necessity, right, in our world today. But I tend to
Yes.
live in the mountains of Utah. I do spend a lot more time outside than I do, or I try to, on my phone. But I am, available or to reach on any of those platforms. And then, I look for, and I will be sure to share with you in
Excellent.
the,
Please.
the 2 books I have coming out shortly. It's been one of those things. I've been wanting to write a book for a long time, and I wrote a dissertation, but this is different, right? This is more of like a person,
Yes.
right? The personal stories. And I love how you have shared yours already. I might be, in the throes of writing, calling you up and saying, how do I get to the next chapter?
Please do. Please do.
But I appreciate you leading the way. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. So be on the lookout.
Well, I definitely will. I know everybody that listens in definitely will. We'll make sure to share it once that book is out, in addition to this episode, and really looking forward to it. And your work in the world is making us all better. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate your time today too.
If you have a moment, please make sure that you've subscribed, forward this to a friend, and drop in a review. It makes a big difference to the success of the show and helps others find it.